We are recording the progress. That's what we do.
We do.
We
We
record the process.
we progressed.
Yes.
Well, that's the idea in life.
Essentially, that's what we're doing with life stuff is recording the process and the progress. Did they hear that? Do you hear that in the recording? Or it's before? So
Here,
nobody knows what we're talking about.
no, nobody hears it.
Oh, so let's explain this to everybody. So every time we go on Zoom, we hear this voice that always says, recording in progress. Is that what she says?
Mhm. With life stuff, we hope that we are always progressing.
We
But
do, and we are.
it's actually life is more of a process because
Ugh. Wow, there you have it.
because not everybody progresses. Life is not a linear line or an
Mhm.
upward line of progress. Basically, life has is ups and downs and mountains and valleys and blah blah blah. So,
It's interesting. I used to think, I don't know if this punctures a hole in my theory, but certainly provides an opportunity to talk about how I see life as like a spiral. And so like even when you feel like you're back, like some people are like, "Oh, I feel like I'm back at the same spot." I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, "You're back at the same spot, but I don't think you're on the same spot. You're higher up in the rung of the spiral. Does that make sense? So you might feel like you're back at the start of that circle, but really you you feel like you are because it's right underneath you, like where you were a year ago, if we're going to use that as like a one rung on the spiral. But to your point, maybe we ditch the spiral.
well, let me continue spiral. I'm playing the opposite side of what you're saying is you saying that you're saying that spiral and you come back to the same point, but you're a little higher up. You can also come back to the same point and be a little lower down. It depends on what happens in your life in that time period. You
Right.
know, I mean, uh, God, we could give so many examples, but I mean, we are basically now. It appears this episode is about what is life stuff,
I guess so.
and it's it's very fascinating because it's different things to different people, and we are just proving that right now. I mean, what your sort of idea of it
Yeah.
and what my idea of it. Um, I mean, and we can only talk from our own experiences. I mean, my last few years has definitely been a life in progress and process in ups and downs and turns and you know uh
Yeah.
one thing I say, one of my other philosophies in life, other than if you don't ask you don't get, is
Mhm.
if you want something to change, something has to change, and life is all about change.
Mhm.
you know uh, as much as people like to live without change and in constant, like my mother does, you can't help it. Things change, you know? Uh, you know, people come and go from your life,
Mhm.
people die, people move. But I think it's pretty hard to find someone who's been in the same spot their whole life, but it's possible.
Yeah, I guess it's not impossible, but even that person is aging. So they are changing. Like the only constant that we actually can rely on, like unequivocally, no matter what, is that the clock keeps ticking. And I don't even think the universe really thinks about itself as a clock ticking, but like the expenditure of time continuing to move is always happening.
Yeah.
That's the only thing we can really rely on because even if somebody wants it to stay the same, they're aging, getting older, their body's changing as they get older. And You can't stop that. At least we haven't figured out how.
Right. It just reminds me of that. I think we've said on the show before, something I heard a long time ago, which I just find fascinating, is that, 100 years from now, nobody that's on this planet is going to be alive, is going to be on this planet, unless someone's born now and lives to 100 or 101.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like 100 years, like
Right.
the same people.
Exactly.
And I just find that like, wow. But the trees will still be there.
Yep.
The ocean will still be there,
Yep.
and
And those have been there for, well, arguably billions of years,
yeah,
you know. And
yeah,
there too, I don't think we've ever been really been able to prove anything about, like, time doesn't seem to speed up or slow down either. Like in the way that you talked about how, like, my version of what life feels like, thinking about it as a spiral, is a little different than your, like, oh, I see it more as hills and valleys and peaks and things. And that I think is true because we all have different ways of interpreting our own experiences. But time is not debatable in that way, like linear time.
it's not, but I can tell you because, I'm twice your age. It literally does, time does go by, even though it technically it doesn't.
Right.
It
But it
feels like
feels.
it feels like it goes faster when you get older,
Mhm.
you know. Um, and it's that's a tough thing for a lot of older people because, when you think about, okay, possibly I have 20 years left to live. That's very different, you know, than someone who's in their 20s who has possibly 60 years left.
And even that, Eddie, like your frame of mind thinking I have 20 years is so different than, like, a 20-year-old's not even thinking I have 80 years, right? It's like that changes too. As you get older, you're much more aware of how much closer you are to what, I mean, it's not like it's like a definitive thing, but it's like generally, we don't all, not a lot of people live past 100. And not even a lot of people get to 100.
Right. But that goes back to the topic of change.
Hmm.
Again, I think it is very different when you're younger, when you're in your 20s or when you're in your 60s,
Yep.
because when you're in your 60s, you've gone through a lot of change.
Yep.
Most people have gone through a lot of change. I mean, in your 20s and your 30s, you're just kind of starting out. There's you're starting your career, you're starting your maybe your marriage or, relationships or whatever.
Yeah.
And you know, some of the friends I know and when they say, "Oh yeah, we've been together, 30 years or 20 something years." It's like, "Holy shit. I've been
Yeah.
I've been single most of that time." And I mean, I'll never get to that place where I'm going to be with someone 20, 30 years. And I mean, that's just what happens with time. It's just a function of, time doesn't stop.
Nope.
As much as we may want it to. Um, yeah,
How do you feel about that?
about what?
That you can't stop it, and that, like, um that you think about it differently now than you did when you were my age.
It's funny though. For me, it's a little bit different. I will answer that. For me, it's a little bit different. I always had a challenge with time, even when I was in my 30s and 40s and 50s, and I kept thinking, well, I'm
What
running.
was the challenge?
The challenge, I just kept thinking I'm running out of time to
Got
do
it.
the things that I wanted to do.
Okay.
Uh, and so now when I'm at this age, I'm like, okay, now I really am running out of time. The good I mean, there's so many aspects to this. And when you asked how
Right.
do I feel about it, like it's tough for me because if I look at, because I've been saying a lot lately that you know, physically and actively, I probably have a good 10 years.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll have more, but realistically, my chronological age, I mean, I'm very fortunate at the moment because I'm way younger than most people at my age. Um, and so maybe I will have more. But the fact is, to answer your question, it's frustrating
Hmm.
because I want more time, you know. As long as I stay healthy and as long as continue to keep having the lives that I have. When you said,
Right.
you had said to me, how many lives do I have? You know,
Yeah.
because when I had my fall a few weeks ago down a ravine and didn't break anything or die, uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, I think the lesson here, and again, we're talking a lot about we're talking about just very general, which is great actually, just like what really is, life stuff. And I think that, it's something you hear all the time. I mean, live life to the fullest, you know, live
Yeah.
every day the best you can. Now that's not always realistic. I mean, you're going to have your down days and you're going to have your days when you're depressed and, you know,
I would say it's relative to the day. Like that accounts for what every day being a different experience is. So live life to the fullest does not always mean that you can reach for like a dance a dance party because that's what you think makes you bring you joy. But in the context of the day that you're having, which could be a very depressing day, which could be a very sad day, which could be a very any emotion, pick any emotion from that starting point or from what life brings you that day, can you still make that day life to the fullest?
so I actually don't even like that term life to the fullest.
Mhm.
As I said, and as you were saying, it's like what does that
Well,
even,
what does that even mean?
yeah. What does that even mean?
Well, I think it's like leaning towards like filling your day with the fullest of its potential. But like I also don't really believe in that anymore because I don't aspire to be busy anymore. I don't aspire to do so many things in one day because then I'm barely able to enjoy like one thing to the next. It's like and but that's my cup of tea that I like a little more flexibility in my day and I like to be able to decide that day whether I want to do something or not. Doesn't mean I don't make plans.
That that's my point. Do what you want to do, even if it's nothing,
Yes.
and be okay with it. Now, there's always the I don't know if yin and yang is the right word, but there's always the other side of that. So yeah, easy for me to say that because I don't have to work.
Right.
But there are people who have to go to work every day, and who have miserable jobs,
Yeah.
and you know, they have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and be at work at 8 and work the full day and then come home and maybe they have a family and they gotta like
Right.
holy shit, So it's kind of easy for us to say because you
But
know
isn't that a collection of choices that have been made, whether they knew they were making them or not? Like, I don't want to, yes, certain circumstances are what make people's lives what they are, but then they also continue to buy into that and keep walking down that road that chains them even more to shit they don't even really want to do. And I'm not even really blaming them for it because maybe they didn't really think they had a choice.
yeah, but I can see just people screaming at us right now. It's like, you know what? I have to fucking work. I have to pay my
Well,
bill.
but so do I.
I know you do, but I just think when I just think it's different somewhat for single gay men.
But that's a choice we made.
No, we didn't make a choice to be gay.
I made a choice to not like stay in a relationship that wasn't going to be successful long term.
So you said two things. Yeah. Okay. So we should separate those things, gay and single.
Yeah.
That's different. Single is yes, we make a choice. But I mean, I can also say to that, is it my choice to be single? Well, I've had many attempts at not being single. It just hasn't worked. So is it a choice? It's kind of circumstances. Like I just haven't met that person to experience not being single with. But that's not
Right.
my point. I want to talk to the people who I want to hear more when you say that. Like when you know, like I know I this I just I know a guy who is really unhappy in his job and is being treated like crap. Just a young guy, but he has to do that job because he's going through for his law degree.
Right.
And he's at towards the end of it, and he doesn't. I said, why don't you just get another job? Because well, it's not that easy to first of all to find a job, which is true for
Yeah.
anybody.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. So how do you for those people to say to us, well, it's easy for you guys because, first of all, I'm retired. You're doing a job that you really enjoy and you make decent money, which allows you to have the kind of days in life that you have. So tell me, how do people deal with when because it's not easy to get a job when you have to pay the bills, when you have a family that you have to feed. I mean, that's a big one. I mean, my dad
Yeah.
worked three jobs for us to have everything that we had. So, did he have a choice? Sure, he could have just let us starve. But I would like to hear what you have to say to those people when you say that you have a choice, because some don't have a choice.
Well, I would say that yes, you're right. There's certain circumstances where people don't have a choice to make the choice maybe they want to make, which could be that they have less responsibility of everything around them so they can do their things that they want to do. But it's kind of what we say a lot on life stuff that you can't really start big, you have to start small. And so in your everyday life, even though most of the things, or maybe like 50% of the things that you feel like you have no choice, you have to do them in order to support your family, in order to do all the things that keep the ship moving.
Yeah.
Sure, those things you have no control over, but there have to be some things that you get to choose, that you get to do for yourself, to give yourself that um like self-empowerment, like that I am not just run by the life I'm living, I'm the one steering the ship. And yes, choices were made along the way that it maybe in retrospect you would have made differently, knowing that it brought you to a place where you feel like you have no control over the ship that's moving forward anymore. But that's neither here nor there because it's already happening. So if you're in a situation where you feel like you don't get to choose life, there have to be small ways that you choose
Well,
how to make your day what you want it to be in and amidst all those responsibilities, which is, I think, more of a mind thing almost, because you might not physically be able to, like, let's say you really want to go to like climb a Mount Kilimanjaro, but that's not possible because you have four kids and you work three jobs and your wife is, sick or something. Like, that's not going to happen. But
well,
how do you move in that direction?
well, you said something there, and I don't even think it's a I wouldn't say how do you move in that direction. I would say how do you uh, deal with the cards you've been given,
Right.
right? So I think it's all about your attitude. If you go into work and say, I hate my job, this is shit, I'm miserable. Go home, I'm miserable. I mean, that's where I think that someone can work on maybe making that a little bit better is their attitude. It's like, okay, I have to do this. I
Yeah.
may not love it. I may not even like it.
Hmm.
But you know what? I have a responsibility. I made the choice to have three kids,
Yeah.
you know, and my responsibility, if I'm going to do that, is to look after those kids, which a lot of people don't do. They just,
Well,
they
it,
don't do it well. But let me finish. So that's what they have to look at. Do the best I can for my children, so they maybe won't be in the same position that I'm in. Sorry. So
no, I was just going to add that, like, and if you didn't think that you had a choice to have those three kids, part of that moment is realizing that you you did choose that, even if you didn't feel like you could say no. And part of that needs to be the realization that you are the one making choices in your life. Life is not always happening at you. Now, there are certain things that do happen at us, but not everything is happening at us. We are a part of the choices that are made. Sometimes we are forced into things, but even that, in the end, there is a level of agreeing to whatever is being presented.
well, I go
Unless it's
back
being
to
forced. That's obviously very different.
see. I can't hear you if I'm say that again.
Unless you're being forced,
Well, like forced. What do you mean?
like physically forced into something. Obviously, that isn't your choice.
Right. But I think the scenario that I gave, if you have a job you don't like, and if you have to support kids, I mean, it's still, I go back to the attitude, and you can still think and hope that that situation is going to change. And maybe there is something that will develop. Maybe an opportunity will come up where you can get yourself out of that, but only if you think that way.
Mm-hmm.
If you just think that, no, this is it. This is my life. I'm resigned to this, even though I hate it. So it's just so much about your thoughts, right?
Because even when you, let's say, get to that place that you think is freedom or is exactly what you want, to our to the reason we're talking about this from the beginning of this conversation, time still doesn't stop. So when you get there, there's always still more. Like there's you've arrived at a place in your life where you don't have a schedule anymore that is requires you to make money, but that is a totally different way of living. It doesn't actually necessarily mean you're happier.
Right.
And
I
so
just
even
find
myself, like there's still like I don't stay as busy as I used to, but that doesn't mean that there are still, like, I still have similar days as before where I'm overwhelmed or don't like the day or something about the situation is not what I want. So I don't think we ever really escape that.
yeah. What I was getting to before, and I wanted to add this in here because I'm I'm following and taking some courses online with this woman
Right.
called Thais. I don't even know how to say her name, but it's Thais Gibson. And you know, she says that every decision that we make in life is based on emotion.
Mm-hmm.
So, she's always bringing up the equation. Beliefs lead to thoughts, thoughts lead to emotions, and emotions lead to actions,
Yeah.
right? So that we can apply that to anything in life.
Mm-hmm. And I
If
think
if you believe that this is you're stuck with this, that's what you're going to think. That's going to create emotions of like depressed and anger and whatever they are, and that's going to lead to your actions.
Mhm. I mean, I think similar to our last episode about like the theory of let them, this is also very theoretical, like this understanding that it goes from thought, or was it thinking, to idea,
Beliefs,
beliefs,
a thought,
thought,
to
to
emotion,
emotion,
to
to an
action.
action. And that we can talk about in a very like this to this to this to this way in these conversations. But when life is actually happening, those happen real fast. And I think after a life, after 10 years of life coaching where we dissected everything we did to the degree at which I think it's sometimes then becomes hard to live just like in flow rather than always hyper analyzing everything that's going on. What I've learned with these theories is that you can know them, you can practice them, you can understand them, but as life happens, in the moment you're not always able to think, oh, this is leading to this, is leading to this, is leading to this, but understanding them does help in the retrospect because you can kind of plot how you got somewhere and then hopefully learn from that for the next time that something arrives, and you can make a different choice based on knowing that, oh, the last time this happened I was quite unaware of this first stage because my emotions were really high. And so that might help you the next time this happens. And I think as you develop those skills, part of it is that you don't judge yourself along the way, that you make mistakes, and that as you make mistakes and you learn from what you did, you can apply that and not hold it against yourself as this chain.
I don't know if that's how life works for most people,
Okay.
because as I, have taken these courses, and if as we both have followed certain people, and we know, like, when I go to a retreat or when I read somebody, it's like, yeah, yeah, you're all enthusiastic and you're going to do it, and then you just forget about it.
Yeah.
So I think what you said is you have to me, it's more than that. You have to practice this. And what she says is that to change your habits and to change your thoughts. And she talks a lot about the subconscious and the conscious. You know, you have to change your conscious in order for it to affect your subconscious. Because your subconscious doesn't think in actions and emotions and all of that. That's your conscious. So the point I'm trying to get is she says that you have to practice this for 21 days. And we've heard that before, in order to break a habit or, to create a habit, it's like takes 21 days. So part of this is you have to do the work and you have to be dedicated to it if you want something to change. I think you can make something change in your life, but it's work.
Mm-hmm.
It's work and it's habit and it's following these principles. And I think most people don't do that. I think perhaps the successful ones do. Um, but again, you have to do the work. And some people I think are just what's the word I said before are not
Digressing.
no, they're just accepting that that's their lot in life.
Right.
But if you're going to do that, then I still say, just try. How can you bring some joy into that? If
Yeah.
you can accept that, if you really can't get out of that situation, you know, maybe it's spending a little bit of extra time with your kids when you get home and creating joy for yourself that way, or creating joy for them or something. I mean, we really got off onto something here when I was like in the beginning, just a general life stuff, talking about what the hell life stuff is, and then we got all fucking serious.
Well, I think the seriousness is a representation of just how complicated life is sometimes. Like, and it is hard to, we've already said this before, like it's hard for us to say this is the way. And yet all we can do is share what we've done. and what's worked for us or what hasn't, or our thoughts about what's worked or what hasn't worked. And and to your kind of latching on to what you said, like part of finding joy is that things inspire you. And so we just always hope that some of the things that we've said would inspire somebody to take some sort of action. Because if I think of the reasons that I've done certain things in my life is because I was inspired by someone else's action. I mean, my mom, she was just listening to one of my Substack posts and reading it, and it inspired her to do something in her life. And I didn't really even think, I just bring it up as an example of like I didn't write it because of that, but and the way it inspired her, I can't even remember what she said, but it was not what I expected somebody to say would inspire them to do. But I was like, oh, which just is another example that like you just don't know what's going to hit someone.
Well, another way of saying that is what we've said many times. If what we say and if this podcast can affect one person in a positive way, then that makes it all worthwhile,
Exactly.
you know. So, all right, let's wrap it up. And my wrap up is just watch it. This episode was literally we were talking about what is life stuff? What does that mean? You know, we haven't
Exactly.
been talking about anything specifically, but just in general, like what does that mean? You know, that's all I would say, but how would you wrap it up?
Yeah, I feel like we talked about the intricacies of life and everything it presents itself with, and how personal and also communal it is. It's we're all experiencing the same thing, and also it's all very different. And yet based on how it started, time is the constant that we all experience. That is something none of us can avoid. And so in the midst everybody's experience being a little bit different, time is always ticking. And it's our choice how we want to reach for some level of joy or emotion during our day. And I'll go along a little longer if you want me to just, continue to ramble.
I'm just smiling because I just like I always think for once, can he
He's gonna he's
can
gonna
he
get it short.
can he make it easier for me to do the teaser and just make it shorter?
Yeah.
That's why I said I just made it very simple.
You
And
and you should just use that.
I can't just use what I said because I kind of just said, I just want to say, look, just watch it. It's 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 it's
Agreed.
it's what it's kind of we got into what we mean by life stuff.
Mhm.
And it's truly uh, uh, our take on life stuff. And that's it.
Yeah.
So watch it.
It's
But I
waiting for you.
but I wanted you to say something because you're right. We did talk about intricacies and we did talk about time and how, you know, time is very different for someone that's older than someone that's younger. And we talked about change and we talked about constant and we talked about what other topics did we talk about? I mean, how to deal with um, when you feel like you're stuck in your life stuff. You
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. It was all kinds of stuff like that.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think you nailed it. Between what you just said and what I said, this episode was a prime example of us not knowing where it was going to go, and starting with this idea of what time is for myself versus you, how constant it is for everybody, but also how incredibly diverse of an experience it is as a human, and how life as it comes at you is an opportunity to respond. And there are ways to do that that might make it easier, but at the same time life can be really hard sometimes. And so you learn to deal with it, and at a young age that might be hard, but as you get older, you do get better at it. And so, there's theories that can help you. There's people that can help you. Hopefully, people inspire you. And that's all we can really do. And the rest you're going to have to watch.
Yeah, I would just add to that. It was, I mean, again, I don't know how we got into it, and maybe, well, you'll see it when you watch it. But we did talk about um, the ups and downs of life,
Mhm.
and you talked about the spiral, and I think that's where it started, about spiraling and coming to the same spot. And I said, no, you spiral and you can come to a spot higher, you can to a spot lower, you know. So that's how we sort of got into it, and we've kind of made it complicated now, but it's actually a very simple uh episode.
I hope you put all of this in the ending. Like just in the full episode, I hope you put our entire attempt at trying to consolidate everything we said has just made it sort of points out how complicated life is. Just trying to like consolidate something that is it's hard to consolidate.
But let me say this. This is our attempt at describing what this episode was about. So,
If it doesn't make sense, you just need to watch the whole thing.
yes. You know what? It's kind of to really wrap it up, what it really says is how simple and how complicated life can be. And that's what our little wrap up was. Like, I tried to make it simple, and you went off on
I
your
my tangent.
your tangent.
Yeah.
So anyway, goodbye.
Goodbye. We'll see you next week.
And
Yeah.
the topic that I wanted to talk about today, I think we should talk about next week. So,
Okay.
and
Great.
I think we might try and do a whole episode on politics.
I was hoping you'd say that because that's the one thing I knew I wanted to talk about today too.
Stay tuned for that. All
Sounds
right,
good.
now it's goodbye.
Bye, everyone.
So, love you.
Love, harmony,
We
joy.
please, we need it.